The winter coat hanging on Marcus Williams's chair was 3 sizes too big, but he wore it like armor. What Jimmy didn't know was that same coat had once saved a life that wasn't his own. As Marcus adjusted the oversized sleeves and settled into the guest chair, the studio lights caught the worn fabric, the careful patches, the way someone treats clothing that means more than warmth. It meant survival. It meant sacrifice. And in 20 minutes, it would mean everything to everyone watching. Marcus Williams, 34, sat across from Jimmy Fallon on this cold February evening, his presence filling the Tonight Show studio with an energy that was part gratitude, part disbelief. 5 years ago, he'd been sleeping in Chicago doorways. Tonight, he was here because his YouTube channel about making it work with nothing had gone viral, teaching people how to stretch a dollar, find free resources, and maintain dignity when the world seems determined to strip it away. "So Marcus," Jimmy said, leaning forward with genuine curiosity, "your video about turning a shopping cart into a mobile office got 12 million views. Tell us about that." Marcus grinned, his smile transforming his weathered face into something boyish despite the lines that spoke of hard years. "Well, Jimmy, when you're homeless, you learn that everything can be something else. A shopping cart isn't just for groceries when you don't have groceries. It becomes your closet, your filing cabinet, your office space." The audience chuckled appreciatively, and Jimmy was clearly engaged. "And the laptop? How does someone without a home get a laptop?" "Library discards," Marcus explained, his hands animated as he spoke. "Libraries upgrade their computers every few years, and if you know who to ask and when to ask, you can sometimes get the old ones. Of course, they're slower than Christmas, but they work. I used to sit outside Starbucks using their Wi-Fi, pretending I was waiting for someone." "That's brilliant," Jimmy said. "What about charging it?" Marcus's eyes sparkled with mischief. 24-hour laundromats, my friend. You find a corner, plug in, and suddenly you're a graduate student doing research. Nobody questions a man with a laptop in a laundromat at 2 a.m. The studio erupted in laughter, and Jimmy shook his head in amazement. "You turned homelessness into entrepreneurship." "Had to," Marcus said simply. "The alternative was giving up, and I wasn't ready to do that. Plus, I figured if I could make it work with nothing, maybe I could teach other people the same thing." Jimmy's expression grew more serious. "How long were you on the streets?" 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, Marcus answered without hesitation. "Lost my job at the auto plant, couldn't make rent, got evicted. Thought it would be temporary, you know? Thought someone would throw me a rope. Took me a while to realize I had to weave my own rope. That must have been incredibly difficult, especially in Chicago winters." Marcus nodded, his hand unconsciously going to the collar of his oversized coat. "Chicago winters don't mess around. When it's -15 and the wind's coming off the lake, you learn real quick that pride doesn't keep you warm." "Is that when you started making the survival videos?" "Actually, the videos came later. When I was on the streets, I was just trying to stay alive, learning which subway grates give off the most heat, which 24-hour businesses let you stay longest without buying anything, how to make a meal out of free samples at the grocery store." Jimmy leaned back, clearly moved by Marcus's matter-of-fact recounting of what must have been desperate times. "What was the hardest part?" Marcus paused, his jovial expression shifting slightly. "The hardest part wasn't the cold or the hunger. It was the invisibility. People look right through you when you're homeless. You become part of the landscape, like a fire hydrant or a stop sign. You're there, but you don't matter." The studio had grown quieter, the audience sensing the shift from entertainment to something deeper. "But the worst part," Marcus continued, his voice taking on a different quality, "was watching other people go through the same thing, especially when they weren't as equipped as I was." Jimmy tilted his head, sensing there was more to this story. "What do you mean?" Marcus looked down at his hands, then back up at Jimmy. "Can I tell you about something that happened? Something I've never talked about on camera?" Behind the scenes, producers felt the familiar shift that happened when Tonight Show interviews moved from prepared talking points to uncharted territory. But Jimmy, without hesitation, nodded. "Of course, Marcus. Whatever you want to share." Marcus took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter, more careful. "It was December 23rd, 2019, coldest night of that winter. The temperature was supposed to drop to -20, and the wind chill was going to make it feel like -40. The audience was completely attentive now, understanding that they were about to hear something significant. I had found a spot under Lower Wacker Drive near the Chicago River. It wasn't great, but it blocked the wind, and there was a heating grate from the subway that gave off just enough warmth to keep you from freezing to death. Jimmy found himself leaning forward, completely absorbed. Around 10 p.m., I heard crying. Not adult crying, but a baby, a real baby. Marcus's voice caught slightly. I looked around and saw this young woman, couldn't have been more than 19, sitting about 20 feet away with an infant in her arms. She was trying to shield the baby from the wind with her jacket, but she was shaking so hard she could barely hold on. The studio was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I watched her for about 10 minutes, and I realized she had no idea what she was doing. No gear, no plan, no understanding of how dangerous it was about to get. She had a baby out there on the coldest night of the year, and they were both going to die. Jimmy's expression had shifted completely. This wasn't entertainment anymore, so I went over to her. Her name was Sarah, and the baby was her 3-month-old son, David. She'd been kicked out by her boyfriend's family, had nowhere to go, and somehow thought she could just wait it out until morning. Marcus paused, his hand going again to that oversized coat. I tried to explain to her how cold it was going to get, how dangerous it was for the baby. But she just kept saying she had nowhere else to go, no one to call, no money for a hotel. "What did you do?" Jimmy asked softly. Marcus looked directly at Jimmy, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I gave her my coat. This coat." He gestured to the garment hanging on his chair. "It was the only thing keeping me alive out there, but that baby needed it more than I did." The audience was completely silent now, some people visibly crying. "But Marcus," Jimmy said, his voice thick with emotion, "if you gave her your coat, how did you—" "I didn't," Marcus said simply. "I nearly died that night. I spent the next 4 hours huddled against that heating grate, using cardboard and newspaper to try to stay warm. By morning, I was hypothermic. EMT found me barely conscious and took me to the hospital." Jimmy stood up from behind his desk without thinking, driven by an instinct that had nothing to do with television production and everything to do with human connection. "Marcus, you saved that baby's life." "Maybe," Marcus said, wiping his eyes. "I never saw them again. Don't know what happened to Sarah and David. But I know they made it through that night because I had something to give them." Jimmy walked around his desk and sat on the edge, eliminating the barrier between them. "You had nothing, and you gave everything." "That's the thing, Jimmy," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "I thought I had nothing. But I learned that night that you're never too poor to be rich in kindness. Even when you don't have a roof over your head, you can still be someone's shelter." The audience began to stir, not with restlessness, but with the kind of emotion that demands expression. Someone started clapping, slowly, reverently. Others joined, not the enthusiastic applause of entertainment, but the recognition of something sacred. Jimmy slid off his desk and walked over to Marcus's chair. Without ceremony, without asking permission, he reached out and took the coat from the chair back. "This coat," Jimmy said, holding it up for the audience to see. "This coat saved a life." He looked at Marcus with profound respect. "You know what I see when I look at this? I don't see old fabric or patches or something 3 sizes too big. I see proof that love doesn't require wealth, that heroism doesn't require a costume, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is give away the one thing you can't afford to lose." Jimmy handed the coat back to Marcus, but as he did, he said something that would define the moment for everyone watching. "Marcus, you said people looked right through you when you were homeless, like you didn't matter. But that night, you mattered more than you'll ever know. You were the difference between life and death for a mother and her baby." Marcus put the coat back on, and for the first time since the interview began, it didn't look too big. It looked exactly right. "You know what the strangest part is?" Marcus said, adjusting the collar. "I got this coat from a donation box outside a church 3 days before that night. Someone else had given it away, probably thinking it was too big, too worn, not good enough. But it was perfect. It was exactly what was needed, exactly when it was needed." Jimmy felt something shift inside himself, something that would change how he approached every show going forward. "What do you want people to know about homelessness, about people who are struggling?" Marcus looked directly into the camera, his voice clear and strong. "That we're not invisible. We're not statistics. We're people with stories, with dreams, with the capacity to love and sacrifice and make a difference. And sometimes, the person you walk past on the street without seeing might be the same person who would give you their last dollar if you needed it. He paused, then continued. But more than that, I want people to know that kindness doesn't cost anything. A smile, acknowledgement, treating someone like they're human, that's free. And sometimes, that's the difference between someone giving up and someone finding the strength to keep going. Jimmy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card, but this gesture felt different from all the others. It felt like a covenant. Marcus, I want you to have this. Not because you're a guest, but because you're someone who understands what it means to be human, what it means to give when you have nothing left to give. Marcus took the card with hands that had once been numb from cold, that had once held nothing but hope and determination. You know what I learned that night, Jimmy? I learned that when you think you have nothing left to give, that's exactly when you discover what you're really made of. The show ended differently that night. No games, no musical guests, no comedy bits. Just Jimmy and Marcus, talking about survival, about sacrifice, about the difference between having nothing and being worth nothing. 6 months later, Marcus's foundation, Sarah's Shelter, opened its doors in Chicago, providing emergency housing specifically for mothers with infants. Jimmy became a major donor, but more importantly, he became an advocate for seeing homeless individuals as fully human, carrying stories of courage and sacrifice that most people never get to hear. The coat still hangs in Marcus's apartment, carefully preserved but no longer worn. Next to it hangs a small photo that arrived in the mail 8 months after the Tonight Show appearance. It shows a young woman and a healthy toddler smiling at the camera. On the back, in careful handwriting, "Thank you for the coat. Thank you for seeing us. David is 2 now and healthy. You saved our lives. Sarah." Marcus never forgot that December night, but now he remembers it differently. Not as the night he almost died, but as the night he learned that the greatest wealth isn't measured in what you have, but in what you're willing to give away. And Jimmy learned something that changed his entire approach to late-night television, that the most powerful stories aren't always the ones that make people laugh. Sometimes they're the ones that remind us what we're capable of when we choose love over self-preservation, when we decide that someone else's need is more important than our own comfort. The Tonight Show continued to be funny, continued to entertain millions. But now, woven through the comedy, there were moments that reminded people of their own capacity for heroism, their own ability to be someone's shelter in a storm. Because sometimes the most important lesson isn't how to survive when you have nothing. It's how to give when you have even less than that. How to be rich in the ways that actually matter, even when your pockets are empty and your future is uncertain. Marcus Williams taught Jimmy Fallon and millions of viewers that true wealth isn't about accumulation. It's about circulation. It's about understanding that everything you have is meant to be shared, especially when sharing it costs you everything. Every winter now, when Jimmy sees someone on the street, he thinks about Marcus and that oversized coat. He thinks about Sarah and baby David, about the choice between self-preservation and sacrifice, about how the most profound acts of love often happen in the spaces between visibility and invisibility, witnessed only by the people who matter most. The Tonight Show became different after that night. Jimmy started ending each week with shelter stories, brief moments sharing acts of unexpected kindness, reminding viewers that heroism doesn't always wear a cape. Viewers began sending in their own stories of quiet sacrifice, creating a community of people who understood that wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. Marcus still makes videos, but now they're about something deeper. How to maintain your humanity when the world treats you as less than human. How to find wealth in poverty. His most popular video, viewed over 50 million times, is titled, "The Night I Learned What Rich Really Means." In it, he simply holds up that same oversized coat and says, "This is worth more than money. This is worth a life." The coat hangs in his apartment like a monument to the night everything changed, not just for Sarah and David, but for Marcus himself. The night he learned that the question isn't what you have, but what you do with what you have. The night he discovered that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is make sure someone else doesn't have to survive the cold alone. That's not just survival, that's transformation. That's what it looks like when someone chooses to be human in the fullest, most generous sense of the word. That's what it means to understand that we're all just one coat away from saving someone's life, one act of kindness away from changing everything.